crashing waves. 'Cause this is the moment. 'Cause this is the moment.
All right. Well, it's Easter. That's exciting, right? Hopefully Easter is an exciting day for you. It's an exciting day in the church world. But today what I want to do is start out with a question, all right? I'm going to ask for a little bit of engagement here, all right? So raise your hand if you've ever seen the movie Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Like nice and high, all right? A couple people. All right. Keep your hand raised, the three of you, if you remember the scene where the narrator says, "And there was much rejoicing." Yeah. Okay, well, if you haven't seen the movie, which seems like a lot of us, it's a pretty funny movie for some people. It's one of those movies where you kind of have to have a certain sense of humor to appreciate it, so it's either really funny or you might just not laugh at all the whole time, because it's kind of corny. But in the movie, there's a narrator, and there's this scene where the narrator speaks, and the idea is like often the characters in the movie can hear the narrator speaking, and the narrator says, "And there was much rejoicing." And you hear this little group of people on the screen, and they're like, "Yay." And then a little while after, same thing happens. The narrator's like, "And there was much rejoicing." And there's this like forced enthusiasm. They're like, "Yay." For me, for years, this part right here, what we're doing right now, this part of Easter Sunday felt a lot like that. Where there was joy. Like I love Easter, and I loved Easter growing up. There was joy because I loved waking up early and eating candy for breakfast. You know, you got the Peeps, the Cadbury eggs, the jelly beans, Reese's eggs, whatever is going on in your basket. It was like a big deal to me. I loved it. It was fun. I loved hanging out with my family later on. But then there was this part where we had to go to church. And then in church, there was a lot of talk about joy and rejoicing. But it was like, okay, we're rejoicing. It was like, okay, yay. Like, it felt like forced. Like I was supposed to act like I was happy about something that, if I'm being totally honest, I didn't really know if I was all that happy about it. And so normally what we do on Easter Sunday is talk about the story of Easter. But this year, what I want to do is look at not so much the story, but more the effects of Easter. Like what Easter is supposed to mean for me and for you personally, especially when it comes to our emotions, like the way we feel about Easter. And if you're someone that's experienced that Monty Python much rejoicing when it comes to the whole church scene, hopefully this will at least give you something to think about, right? So Jesus, when he was with his friends, his followers, these people we call the disciples, he explained a lot of things to them, and they didn't always get it. You know, they didn't always connect the dots. And so he often had to repeat himself, and he would say things in different ways, because these guys, they were pretty slow to catch on to things. And I can appreciate that because I'm pretty slow to catch on to things. But he's trying to explain to them that he's gonna die and that in 3 days he would come back. And so he says, like just very clearly, I'm gonna die, and 3 days later, I'm gonna come back. And they didn't get it. It just didn't make sense to them. And so he tried a different approach. He actually tried a few different approaches, but this is my favorite one, okay? And you can read this for yourself. It's in John chapter 16. Here's how he explains what's about to happen, how he's going to die, and then he's gonna come back. Here's how he says it. I love this. It says, Jesus went on to say, ready? In a little while, you will see me no more. And then, after a little while, like another little while, you will see me. All right, that's pretty simple. You know, it doesn't get really more broken down than that. And then it's interesting, if you read the chapter, they're like, what does he mean? Like, what does he mean we're not gonna see him, and then we're gonna see him? Like, what is this little while? They're asking all these questions. And then he gets to the emotional part, right? The part where he explains, and by emotional, I mean he explains how this will hit them emotionally when he rises from the dead, when the whole Easter thing happens. He says, I will see you again, and you will rejoice. And then he takes it up a notch and he says, and no one will take away your joy. That's what's going to happen when I rise from the dead, he says. And so what he's communicating to his followers, to people who believed in him, to the people who would be in church on Easter Sunday, he's saying all of this, the whole thing, the point at which it all becomes like it all makes sense, the whole faith thing, the whole church thing, the whole God thing, the whole thing that led up to me rising from the dead, when that comes to a head, it will produce in you unshakable, untakeable joy. Like, not just like happy all the time, smiling, right? People think you're crazy. He's talking about this deep-rooted anchor of joy because of what he's done. So, the question then is, does that explanation match your experience with Easter? With church, with God, with the whole idea of this whole religious thing, however you want to categorize it. Does it produce in you an anchor of untakeable, unshakable joy or not? Not like it's supposed to, not you have to try to have it, but it will produce this. And if not, why? Like if you're like me, honestly, my story, the feeling that came to the surface for me were feelings of guilt, judgment, sometimes manipulation, and definitely obligation. That's what I got from the whole church package. Like, it felt inadequate. I on my list of things that I feel when it came to thinking about God and religion was not joy, especially unshakable joy. Joy that no one can touch and no one could take. And so the question is, what happened, right? If you go on Amazon, right, which I'm sure none of us do, Amazon.com, and you buy something, and in the description it says, this product will give you unshakable joy. And then you get it and it makes you feel guilty and judged and gives you a sense of obligation. That product is getting 1 star and it's being sent back. And that's what a lot of us have done with our faith, right? It just didn't deliver. And so it gets 1 star and sent back. No thanks, not for me. So what happened? What happened? I don't know what your story is, but if your story is anything like my story, really what happened was the place I went wrong was in the place that I started. Like where my understanding of Jesus and church and the resurrection, where it started. And it wasn't necessarily a place that was wrong, but it was a place that wasn't the best. And it stands in pretty stark contrast from the place that the original followers of Jesus started. And here's what I mean, right? So the way I understood Easter, what we're celebrating, is that Jesus said he would die, and he said he would rise from the dead. And when he rose from the dead, it proved that he meant what he said. In fact, the whole idea of what he said, there's a lot of emphasis on that in the Easter story. If you read it for yourself, this comes up a lot. The first time the Easter story, the resurrection, is ever explained after it's happened, this is how it's explained. There's a woman who goes to the tomb and she's looking for Jesus, and what she's told is that he's not here. Maybe you've heard that. He has risen, ready, just as he said. Now that's not like a quick little, I told you so, right? There's emphasis there. Like part of this whole thing is that he meant what he said. That's part of the Easter story. Of course, the resurrection is a big part of it. Of course, him dying is a big part of it. But part of the display of power was that he said this was going to happen. And then it was like it happened the way he said it was going to happen. And so for me, again, this is all true. This is all true, right? And it's all good. It's all good. But for me, the picture then that was painted of God and Jesus, and what it comes to when we talk about Easter, the resurrection, was one that was powerful. Powerful. Easter, the resurrection, was this display of the power of Jesus. And so we'll see all these words. Maybe you've heard some of these words around the idea of the resurrection. Words like strength, right? The resurrection, it was a display of his strength. And maybe you've heard how he's able, another like power word. There are old hymns written about how God is able. If he's able to rise from the dead, there's nothing that he can't do, right? He's able because of his strength, because he's powerful. He delivers. He delivers from death. It's an idea of power. He's a giver of life. The source of life, the giver of life, and maybe you've heard, he's victorious. He's the undefeated champion. And that's all true. It's all true. But for me, it painted a picture of a God who was first, the place where I started was that he was powerful. And he called what he said he was going to do. He meant what he said, and it proved that there was weight to his words. My aunt and uncle, they have, as far as I can remember, they've always had a Doberman, which if you don't know what Doberman is big dog, massive, strong, lots of muscles. Right now they have one, his name is Adonis. He's a beast. He's the nicest dog in the world, but he's scary looking. And then before Adonis, they had another one, her name was Xena, and they're both they were just pure muscle. Their appearance was striking, and you look at them and it's just power. It's impressive. There's some awe there. In fact, it's fun. Whenever, sometimes I'll be at their house and the dogs, they're so well trained, nicest dogs in the world, but I'd be at their house and if one of the dogs was out in front, if Adonis is out in front, what you'll see is people walking by the house and they see the dog and they walk on the other side of the street. They keep things at a distance, right? Just because it feels safer that way. And for some of us, God is this picture of power. And maybe it produces in you feelings of awe, and it should. And reverence, and it should. And maybe though, it's even fear and intimidation. If it just starts at power. But for the original followers of Jesus, these guys and girls who were with him early on, they didn't start with this display of power. They started by getting to know him. And what they saw over time and time again, was a display that could only be explained as love. Love. In fact, John, who was a close friend of Jesus, at the end of his life, he looks back on his experience and he's to sum it all up, he's God is love. Love. And it was because Jesus had this ability when he was with people to make them feel and know their value. He gave time to people that no one else gave time to. He helped people see what they were worth. He gave his attention to them. He gave people a sense of purpose. He not only helped people with the things that he did to them, but the things that he said to them were life-changing. And behind all of it was this clear desire for their good, this clear sense of love. And as time went on, these people that were getting to know Jesus, over and over again, they were shocked by what he was willing to do, the places he was willing to go, the people he was willing to associate with, the things he was willing to say. At one point, he gets on his hands and knees and starts washing people's feet, which if you think that's gross now, it was horrible in the ancient world because they weren't as clean as we are. And so he gets on the ground and washes, and they're just blown away by what this guy is willing to do and who he claimed to be. He made over and over again, he would make these promises that nobody else would make. Promises that if they were true were life-changing. He promised them that they didn't have to worry. Not that there wouldn't be anything to worry about, but that they didn't have to worry. He promised them that they were worth something. He promised them that they could have hope. He promised them that God was good even when life seemed like it wasn't. He made promises, he made claims that almost seemed too good to be true. And he offered a way of life that was attractive. It was a way of life that people had difficulty resisting. Everywhere Jesus went, he attracted multitudes. He was magnetic. And part of it was because he offered. A lot of people don't realize this. Jesus came to offer, not a list of rules, not like do's and don'ts. He came and claimed to offer life to the full, life more abundantly, life that's worth living, life that's better than whatever you were living before, life that's eternal, not just in time, but in quality. And through all of this, they looked back, these followers of Jesus, and had this sense that he was in their corner. This idea of what later writers in the New Testament would call grace. Grace, not grace, a lot of us think grace, we just think forgiveness. No, grace is undeserved favor, meaning he was in their corner whether they deserved it or not, whether they asked for it or not, whether they had a good day or not, whether their beliefs were strong or not, whether they doubted or not. He was in their corner, like rooting for them, pulling for them. He was for them. And so through all of this for years, these people that followed him around, they knew him first. The place where they started was not powerful. It was deeply personal. For them, the things that he said, they were almost too good to be true. And then he died. And they packed up and went home. Like if you look throughout history, there are a lot of leaders that have followers, and the leader dies and the followers are like, all right, we got to carry his cause. But that's not what Jesus' followers did. He died and they were like, well, forget it. The things that he claimed were too extreme, and they were all about him. And so if he's not who he said he was, then this whole thing is just pointless. It's nothing. And so they went into hiding. They packed up and went home. They gave up on it, and they, went back to their old lives. Just for a few days. Because if you know this story, what we celebrate on Easter, on the third day, he came back. And for them, this whole idea of this person and this way of life that seemed too good to be true was true. It was the moment when the one that they knew personally, they saw powerfully. And these two things together produced a real sense of joy that no one could take. Because this strength that he had was driven by love. And what was amazing was not just what he was able to do, but the things he was willing to do. It wasn't just the promises that he made, but when he came back from the dead, he proved he could deliver on those promises, right? If somebody tells you not to worry and then you watch them get beat and see their dead body hanging on a cross, that doesn't hold much weight. But when they come back from the dead and say, yeah, I told you I was going to do that, all of a sudden, those words have real weight. He offered them life to the full, and he proved he was a giver. He could give what he offered. He could deliver on that promise. And what I think is the most moving part of the whole story is that he was victorious. He's the undefeated champion. He is good in every way. And they knew him to be in their corner. And for them, that was good news. You see, for them, Easter, the moment Easter became a thing, what it proved to this person that they knew personally, to them, about this person they knew personally, was that Easter meant on Easter, he meant what he said to them. Not just in general, not just about himself, but to them. And for them, because of the things that they said, that he said, it produced in them this unshakable, untakable joy. But it was because they knew him. For me, what my issue was that I understood this God to be powerful, but distant. Not close and personal. He's powerful, he's distant, and that's great, and it's impressive, but what does it mean for me? Like, the thing for them that changed everything was that their personal hero, personal friend, Jesus would say, he called them friends, proved himself to be this powerful God. And it was good news because it showed them that he meant everything that he said to them. It was a whole package of things. And it gave them joy. I think the issue for most of us, and I know for a lot of people who are actually part of this church, is I always saw God as this powerful figure, but he was at a distance. I didn't know he was deeply concerned about me. That he genuinely cared about my life and my plans and my goals and what I'm worth. But the moment you begin to see that, things change. And so what he said to these people, it wasn't in an instant. He invited them early on. Like, he literally would just say, come and see. Come and see. And they saw, and it took time, and they had ups and downs, and sometimes it made sense, and sometimes it didn't. Sometimes they got a little closer, and sometimes they took 2 steps back. But they came and they saw. He said, literally, come follow me. And all along the way, that's when they got to know him personally. And when the God that you know personally shows himself to be one who is powerful and can deliver on what he says, that's life-changing. And I think what my hope is for you and really for myself is that every year, Easter will be a reminder that he meant what he said to you. That he meant what he said to me. That you don't have to worry. That you are worth more than you realize. That you have value. That you can have hope even when your world is falling apart. But that comes from knowing him. And so I would give you the same invitation that he gave his followers early on. Come and see. Come and see. That's why we've started this church and set it up the way that we have, so that you can come and see, just take a small step. It's why we do start parties. It's why we're doing one in 2 weeks strategically after Easter, so that maybe if you're someone that's not sure, you can come and take a step and see, is there anything to this? Maybe there is a God, not who's going to give me a list of things to do, not who's going to weigh me down with guilt and obligation and feelings of judgment, but who's genuinely for me, genuinely in my corner, and maybe there's more for me to see. And maybe we'll see that he meant what he said to us. And that will produce in us joy. Untakable, unshakable joy. We're just about out of time, so I'm going to ask the band to come back up here. But here's the story I want to leave you with, a picture I want to leave you with. I mentioned my aunt and uncle before. A few years ago, my aunt was in her garage, and she was doing some work. The garage door was open. She's doing some work, I guess, with her back turned. And she turns around and she sees this large, strange dog that is not her own coming toward her. And she backed into a corner and she was terrified that this animal was approaching her. And within seconds, her dog, Xena, came racing into the garage, and with her backed in the corner, the dog stood in between her and this other dog and looked forward and refused to move until the dog left. It was amazing. It was like the dog knew not to look the other dog in the eyes or they would have fought. But she just stayed there with her body pressed up against my aunt as if to say, I've got you. It was this picture of power meeting love, like deep concern. And maybe today for you, when you hear about Jesus and God and the resurrection and church, you move over to the other side of the street because it feels a little safer to just keep it at an arm's length. But maybe if you take a step in this direction, if you come and see, maybe you'd see that there's a God who wants you to see him as a father you can trust, who's in your corner, who comes running when you need him, and who wants you to know he's got you. That he meant what he said, not just then, not just to them, but to you and to me. And maybe that will give us unshakable, untakeable joy.